Welcome to UberCube, the podcast where we discuss all things cube, but with refreshments. This is your host, Anthony Adams, aka Uberbear, and I'm joined by my other host.
And hey, this is Stu, and hope you enjoy the show.
Yeah, so we have a fun episode. We took a challenge. We had a listener that's on a Facebook page that we joins, MTG Drafting, that brought up this amazing idea. And the gist of the idea is, well, what if you were to take a whole bunch of your bulk rares, 45 of them to be exact, and you met up with your buddies and you drafted from this consolidated box of said cards, and then at the end of the game, everybody would take the cards home and then leave with basically an ante, if you will, or swap out. There's some fallacies in that idea. So once they did that, it put a brainworm in my head this morning, and I reached out to the crowd and I said, "Hey, gentlemen,
we have an idea.
We have an idea, and we're going to turn this into a cube idea." But
right.
Before we go any further down this path, that was a little interlude for you. But let's do our libations of the show.
Let's start with the refreshments. Anthony, what you got for us
I
today?
am having a Lagunitas, a little something something, smooth, silky wheat IPA.
Absolutely one of my most favorite IPAs.
Yeah,
Love
this is a new one for me. Actually, I've had the
It's
little
very
something
good.
something or the little something
Little
singular, but this is the bomb.
Very, very
I
good.
may have pre-gamed a little bit here, folks. What about you, Stu?
I'm actually just going with a Guinness today. I'm keeping it straightforward, nice and simple.
Yeah, so let's go ahead and crack these open and get
All right,
to the topic.
Crack it. All right, so as Anthony mentioned, this idea came to us via social media, and I will say, personally, as soon as I saw this and we started getting this discussion going about the birth of this cube idea, I was instantly fascinated with it, right? I can imagine this is so appealing to so many people, right? It's got to be appealing to cube people, right? Because you can just fairly straightforward way of getting some people together to build a cube. I can imagine it must be also pretty appealing to your old school Commander players who remember building 100-card singleton deck out of whatever you've got in old boxes or maybe grocery bags of Magic cards that you've got lying around. So today we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about what we're calling this community project to build a cube. We're all going to have a little role in the building of this cube. And like I say, community project to just see what we can come up with.
Yeah, so we've kind of set some prereqs here, right? So within our group, we said, hey, we wanted to contribute 45 cards. And for this particular, I got on it immediately and I said, hey, I got an extra box. I've got some sleeves and we'll kind of work that out here shortly. And the rules are, it needs to be a bulk rare. So that'd be an estimated $1, $2 max.
No going out and putting in orders at TCG Player or whatever.
It's going to be with what you got.
Or wherever you buy your cards.
Yep.
No doing that.
It's going to be so we're trying to do an idea that's very accessible.
Yeah.
And we don't know if this is going to work. This is going to be a multi-tier, multi-episode type of thing.
Yes.
And what we want to show is the ease, the entry point, how you too can also build a cube with your friend circle and basically come out with an idea. Just using the cards that you have on hand we're not even going to put any depth into this right now.
No.
Think we're doing scrapes here, right?
Yeah.
It's going to be an onion-based type of idea.
At least
level 1, episode 1, the idea.
Yeah, and at least I think setting expectations early on, the idea of this is no matter how small or how large your collection might be, right? If you've got some vast collection you've been playing for many, many years, you're probably going to have those cards that you think, man, I really used to enjoy playing with this card or that card. Haven't been able to find a home for it in either a 60-card constructed deck or a 100-card constructed deck or whatever the case may be. But this is the opportunity for players who have got a good size collection to be able to contribute some pet cards. And maybe if you're a newer player, you haven't quite got the collection, this is the opportunity for you to really contribute something to this group project and maybe play some of those cards man, that's a really cool card. I didn't really get to use it a whole lot when I drafted it or when I got it in that box. Well, now's that time to shine.
Yeah. So also, I'm an amateur hobbyist writer. At least I have been for years. So when someone puts a brainworm, my process, step one, come up with a name. That's always how I've written stories. First, I come up with the title. You start building the story elements from there, right? The introduction, the body, the summary, and then I square out from there. But always start with the title because it kind of gives me the path at which the river is going to flow. My thought river, right?
Yep.
So I said, well, This is going to be the Dumpster Fire Project cube. I mean, it all got us giggling. And then, so you know what? Before I even get the story going, I need something that represents this. I'm going to pull up Cube Cobra, and how do I represent this idea? Well, burning down the house, which is not going to necessarily go into this cube, but it literally, and this will be included in the show notes, but burning down the house is a bunch of devils standing outside of a mansion, I guess somewhere in Innistrad, and this place is getting leveled. That is what I'm envisioning this cube is going to be.
I think it's appropriate because it's like, man, the only time these cards are maybe likely to see any action is, in a fire. You're short of something to burn when you're trying to cook a chicken breast or something. I don't know, but now these like forgotten cards are finally going to have a home.
So the basis is that we're going to put these cards together without putting a lot of thought into archetypes or synergies or any of the above.
I would say
there was some prereq. There was some prereqs. Yeah, and one of the prereqs we had was it must be playable in some form, right?
Yes.
Just don't put a card in here just because destroys all artifacts and you don't have an artifact in the cube. Stuff like that. We don't want your complete draft chaff.
Exactly.
It needs to be semi-functional, even if the ability or the secondary function of the card doesn't apply to the cube, at least have stats that are semi-reasonable, right? And so that was kind of the prereq, right? And it had to be, we said rare level, but I've also included some mythics in here too.
Okay.
And then the other thing I said, well, we're all drafters, and a lot of people draft, and everybody understands what it's like to go to a pre-release or a limited draft set. And you kind of got to have some lands, at least some form of fixing, right?
Yes.
The fixing really does directly correlate to the speed of the
Magic isn't fun if you can't play your spells at the end of the day. And
But
you don't
we
want to push everyone
yeah.
to having to play like one or maybe two cards.
But we don't want to spend any money, right? And we want to have some kind of equilibrium in the land base. So we have decided amongst ourselves what is most common, right? So it's going to be basically the gain lands and the guild gates.
Guild gates. I've got some scry lands. We might
toss in some tri lands. It's just as long as we have some kind of we're gonna compare our notes amongst each other. So step one was the idea, right? And we have to thank a listener on our Facebook group page that gave us this brainworm that I ran with this morning.
Absolutely.
So then I get on our little chat group we have amongst our friend circle, which includes Chris and David and Christian and Stu and Nathan and Jason, and I could just keep rambling off names. And everybody was Avram, and everybody was like, okay, we're doing this.
Yes, we're doing it.
We're doing this immediately. And everybody started saying, well, I've got cards. Because everybody's got binders full of just chaff. Or you've got a box that you were going to sell for a nickel and you would have made $3.
Yeah.
So what I did as step one is I went ahead and just started going through my binders. And I had to limit myself because the idea is this isn't Anthony's cube. This is the Team Uber Cube, right, group. This is going to be all of us. So I can't dominate this story.
No, but I think it's important that we start out with some choices that you have made, right?
Yeah.
As this is going to be episode 1 in a little mini series that we're going to do about the birth and the evolution of this cube, right? So Anthony is obviously, after this idea has got into his head, he's gone through and he's looked through his cards and he's thought, right, what are the cards that I want to put in this cube that either represent a little bit about me or cards that I wish I could play in another deck or another format that I haven't been able to play in a long time. We'll follow it up in the future. We'll record more episodes where we'll talk about the evolution of, the cube from this point that it is right now, which is just Anthony's contribution. And then once we start adding everybody else's contribution to this cube, then we'll start really seeing it sort of shape itself, right? But I really do think it's important just to get a single person's perspective. Obviously, Anthony, we're doing you right now. As far as the cards that you're just looking at in those boxes, why did you put these in?
Yeah.
I want to actually ask you, right?
Go ahead.
So we're going to start out. First card.
Get in there.
Right? This is Tivadar of Thorn. This is a 1 colorless, 2 white, legendary creature, human lord, first strike, protection from red. It's a 2/2. And when Tivadar of Thorn comes into play, destroy target goblin. The reason why I wanted to bring this up, right? It's actually the first card in Q Cobra when you bring up the view on this, right? You're putting in, it's a 3 mana, 2/2 with first strike, protection from red, right? Those are pretty good stats. Mm-hmm. But it also has this, what I would say is a pretty cool second ability, destroy target goblin. How many goblins do you have goblins? Like, was that
I did
a consideration?
not. No,
when you
it
put
wasn't.
in?
So the first thought was just scratch through the binders, scratch through the chaff, right, and then stack them up. And I didn't want to put. What I wanted to put is we'll call them signposts, but they're not. I'm not
Okay.
trying to lead the other curators to the water, right? I just want to give them signals. Like if someone just happens to have a legendary goblin they want to toss in, sure. If not, this on rate, a first strike protection from red for a 2/2, it's going to be sufficient enough because when you're doing a bulk rare cube, and these aren't going to be really, really great cards.
No.
There's a strong chance that a lot of your spells are going to be very top heavy.
You read my mind 100%. The fact that it's a 3 mana 2/2 first strike with pro red, that by itself to me is enough.
It's good enough.
The destroy target goblin. If you're playing this in a play group, you can tell everyone, look, I put this in this cube. There's not any goblins, or I haven't contributed any goblins to this cube, and maybe no one contributes any goblins to this cube. But hey, it's a cool card. I like the art. And I think the stats by itself without that secondary are enough.
And then there's an emotional attachment to a lot of the cards that you'll see in this list, which I will share. Okay. And this one here is one that every time I flip through my binder, I've giggled a little bit going, I'm going to get a goblin player someday. I'm going to build a commander deck out of it. And
I have a goblin deck.
And I never found myself ever
I have 2 goblin decks.
You did. And I thought about you every time. Like literally I'm flipping through this. I'm like, because I don't want to make the antithesis to a EDH deck that you formed up. I don't want to pull we're going to give a little bit of love to our good friend Christian that likes to build the anti-deck. He says it's coincidental every time, but it seems to happen. Answers.deck for someone else. It seems to happen more often than not.
He did it to me yesterday.
This is love.
He did it to me yesterday. We cube drafted Samich or Chris Moore's Vintage Cube. We did a 6-man draft, and my first 2 matches were pretty good, and then Christian just built the absolute anti-deck of mine. It was the antithesis. So anyway, talk to me about your next choice.
So the next one actually is going to be Angel of Glory's Rise. For 5 colorless and 2 white, you get, or 2 plains, you get a 4/6 flying angel. When Angel of Glory's Rise enters the battlefield, exile all zombies, then return all human creature cards from your graveyard to the battlefield. My logic behind this is it has evasion. It's a 4/6. Somewhere along this, when people start adding cards to this cube, that there may be some incidental zombies, but unlikely, but most likely because humans are so apparent in almost it's one of the most common cube types, which we're going to talk about, or creature types.
Absolutely.
We're going to talk about that on a future episode using word clouds and whatnot. Mm-hmm. That is just incidentally going to come up more often than not. So I saw this as a bulk rare that could act as a strange form of a one-sided reanimator. Well, if you're following my flow here, bring back your dead humans, put them back on the battlefield. Incidental on the zombies, but let's see what happens, right? And it may give others an interesting path when they're flipping through their binders. They might go, tee-hee, I'm going to add some cool rare zombie that hasn't seen any gameplay, and it may happen, just like a goblin.
So again, we can sort of draw that parallel between Tivadar of Thorn, where you've got that secondary ability that might not be relevant, and you're 100% right. We could go through this whole cube building process with everybody, and there's not really much, if any, of a zombie sub-theme. But again, it's got that secondary ability of bringing all the human cards from your graveyard to the battlefield. That's not an insignificant ability. And certainly in a slower cube, yes, this is 7 mana, but you are getting a pretty sizable creature, right? It's a 4/6. But for me, I see you with this. You know what I'm thinking? I'm thinking, where are my zombies at? Like, I'm going to contribute. I'm a contributor to this cube, right?
Yeah.
I want to put some zombies
I want to
in
see
there.
if people found paths, right? And I
this
wasn't
is
trying
my
to
path.
overly influence people on what they do, but kind of we talked about this. We were sitting down pre-gaming again. And so the cube size, we're going to try to do some limitations. It's undetermined. The group still has to meet and talk about it, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
So maybe a 360, maybe a 450. We don't know yet. And then once we have that and everybody's contributed their pieces of the pie, and that some make more than others, and that's fine. It's based on what you have, and there's no added cost to this cube, except for we have agreed as a group that we're going to purchase a singular, like jet matte dragon shields. And when I even said double sleeving these, people stared at me like I'm crazy. It's the look and texture of it, right? We want this to look sweet and be fun. And we don't want this to be the dumpster fire that we were calling it. There's intent here. But at the end of the day, I don't want to put too many signposts that influences the group, but I was just feeling antsy today, and I started typing this sucker up.
Where I think I don't mind that in fact, I would welcome, personally, I do welcome the first person who says, you know what, we're doing this project, I'm just going to, someone has to be first. right? Unless you just get everybody all in the same room.
We could have went blind, but I think we could have
gone completely blind. We could have done, right? But I actually like this concept because now you've got some, you've put some little ideas in my head, right? The zombies thing, the goblins thing. I will, as the more I think about it, the more I'm very, very confident at this stage. I am probably not going to include any goblins. I kind of want to avoid it. It's a bit of a, I don't want to say overplayed try. And I've already got a couple of goblin decks, so I'm not too worried about goblins. Humans, on the other hand, that's really got me thinking, or the humans exiling zombies. Now I'm starting to think about zombies. I don't really have a whole lot in the way of zombies. So not only do I get to go in and look for cards that I don't typically play in other decks, but I do get to sort of contribute to a potential archetype within this cube, and that's interesting to me.
And then we'll cover, because right now there's only 3 white cards that I've added. I just literally, there was no purpose here. I wasn't doing any balancing. No, it's for the others to fill in the blanks, right? I mean, when we're done, we're going to try to make this as balanced and curated as possible. But I added Fumigate in here for a board wipe, which was a reason why and the reason why I added that, it's not so much as, it's not chaff, it's a good card. I just have like 6 of them. And I don't need 6 of them. And selling it, I'm not going to get any value out of it, right? And so what I did have a heavy density of is some really high yield, strong, not so strong blue cards that just don't get represented a great deal in cube. It's going to be one of those you don't know if it's good until you do it, right? Steve, would you mind taking on this first one, the first Sphinx there?
All right, so the first one we're going to talk about is Sphinx of Foresight. I believe this is from Ravnica Allegiance.
Yeah, it's one of those.
If I remember
Return
correctly.
to Ravnica. I'm not sure. That said symbol.
Is it Return to Ravnica? It might be Return.
It's certainly a chaff piece that I got from a draft.
It's a Ravnica, right? So anyway, yeah, Sphinx of Foresight, 2 colorless and 2 blue for a Sphinx. You may reveal this card from your opening hand. If you do, scry 3 at the beginning of your first upkeep. It has flying. At the beginning of your upkeep, scry 1. So that's pretty, that's not bad.
It's mana.
And it's a 4 mana for 4/4.
So it's on rate. It's a 4/4 flyer on rate.
It's above rate. I would say it's better than rate.
Yeah, you came out good. You came out good as a player, right? And there's nothing to scoff at. Not a great card. Not going to find a lot of homes. But in this particular, what we're doing here is sitting in a binder. It's not really good at anything, and it's not really bad at anything. And so it just sits in my binder as I turn the pages, and I'm like, you know what? I'm tossing it in there. It's pretty sweet because there might be some Sphinx energies that someone might come across, right?
Absolutely.
Which leads me over to the next card. You never know if you're going to get a factional type Sphinx. Let's see what happens, right? Guardian of Tazim for 3 colorless and 2 blue. You get a creature Sphinx, flying. Landfall. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, tap target creature an opponent controls. If that land is an island, that creature doesn't untap during its controller's next untap step.
Pretty good.
For a 4/5.
Pretty good.
Yeah, 4/5 for 5. I mean, that's also, again, that's kind of, so going back to the project that we're talking about, it was one of the stipulations in our group text is, please don't put anything that's unplayable, right? I mean, there is some of that, right? The pips, we're not really counting pips in this one because we are going to do some splashing with some very slow lands like Tri-lands, maybe Gilgate, some gain lands to be determined, right?
Yeah.
This is all going to be whatever people have in their binders, and as long as we have equilibrium in those ideas, we don't want to cause one, I guess, faction or card set or archetype to dominate another because we gave it a land base that's unfair. So we're going to keep them all a little dumpy, very dumpster fire oriented land base.
I was going to say that this is definitely there's a land theme here, and I'm not surprised it's coming from you, given how much
I do love the lands.
I know you love your lands.
Do. Would you mind taking on this next one there, big fella?
Yeah, so the next one is, and this is a pretty popular card. This is Arcanis, the Omnipotent, 3 colorless, 3 blue for a legendary creature wizard. And you can tap Arcanis to draw 3 cards, and you can pay 2 colorless and 2 blue, return Arcanis, the Omnipotent, to its owner's hand. It's a 3/4, it's costing you 6. But anytime you get to just tap 1 permanent and draw 3 cards, that's pretty good.
Yeah, no, that's not bad. It'll give you some card advantage. It costs 1 billion mana. I do acknowledge that. There's going to be no cheating unless someone adds it, right? We don't know what's coming.
This is pretty much like, I would hazard a guess to say, if I see this, I'm probably taking it pretty high in a draft.
Sure.
If I see someone else land this card, I'm trying to get rid of it as soon as possible.
We're going to kind of move through the blue section here. Another card that I came across, and it's got to be, obviously, we talked about, we're doing rarity restrictions.
That's right.
Highest tier, bulk, right? This card's kind of fun. I didn't even realize it. I'm flipping through there, and I'm like, this is pretty neat. And it's got a picture of Tamio on it, I believe. And she's got a weird, like, dome around her, and she's reflecting a spell, and it's access denied. For 3 colorless and 2 blue, you get an instant counter target spell for 5 mana. Not bad on rate.
Oh, do you get to exile a blue card from your hand and pay a life to counter?
No. You get to do even better. You get to create X 1/1 colorless Thopter artifact creature tokens with flying, where X is that spell's mana value. That makes you do choice, right? Because some of these are going to be really fat. Like, and I won't read this card because some of these are going to get really windy. Bulk rares have a lot of text.
What are you talking about? No artifact theme in this. I mean, you can't put that in and not have an artifact.
And then we have Ether Squall Ancient, which is 7 mana, 2 blue, 5 colorless. It's a 6/6. It's basically gonna make a lot of energy. I don't know if this card's gonna stay. I'm putting it out to the group. I added it. And at the beginning of your upkeep, you get 3 energy. And then you can pay, goodness gracious, a lot of energy, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. I think I got that right. Don't even know. Maybe 8. 8 energy.
We'll go with 8.
A lot of symbols.
We'll go with 8 because it is 8.
Okay. But, return all other creatures to their owner's hands. Activate this ability only time you could cast a sorcery for a 6/6. It's a not so great board sweeper-esque.
I remember when energy like completely took over. I believe it was standard when it came out, right? Energy was kind of a big deal. And it just completely fell off the face of the earth once, I'm pretty sure. Is it from Kaladesh?
Yes, this is from Kaladesh.
From Kaladesh, right?
Energy was one of those ones where you couldn't interact with the energy. It's kind of problematic.
No, it's like it's a resource that, it just kind of sits there. Like you say, you can't interact.
It's a battery and you can't interact. I think it may have been one of those R&D mistakes in retrospect because some cards broke the game.
I've used energy. I have used cards with this ability.
You used the elephant, right? And broke it. I know you did.
So there's you can
bounce them back and forth.
Yeah, you can bounce it if you only have so much energy, and then So
we'll add that to the show
notes. Maybe there's. I'm sure there's plenty of players out there that love them some energy. This is your time to shine with those cards.
Yeah. So the point of this episode is just to highlight some cards that are outside of the norm that I had in my binders. We're going to see what the other people have to do with it. And the next one we're going to move over to our black section. We're just going to highlight a few of them. I will include both the link to this cube at its present, which is only, as I said, 74 cards. Currently my pieces. We're going to have a lot of other pieces added over the next few weeks. Hopefully this is not like the episode of Back to the Future where it says to be continued, and then you have to wait. How many years was that when they made you wait from part 1 to part 2? It was insane. Like you waited almost like 6 years as a kid. To be continued is not something you should tell a young child.
No.
Go, yes, it's going to be like 6 months. No.
You know what? We're going to make the effort because I know I am guilty about saying like, hey, I'll do this on the socials, and then I never do. But I think this is definitely one. We'll definitely post the link on Twitter, on our Discord, all that kind of stuff. And, we'll put some notifications out there. I think, if anyone has any interest, which I hope our listeners do, in sort of seeing the evolution of this cube, I hope that, you'll keep checking it out.
Yeah, and the whole idea, by the way, the price point on this, it's very important to point out.
It's meant to be $0.
It's like $31. Sleeves. It's like $31
Sleeves.
Of bulk that I had. Yeah. That's the value that if I purchased it, right? I mean, this cube is going to be transitioned to your group, whatever your flavor is, whatever you have amongst your peers. You say, hey guys, I have an idea. How about we assemble a cube? We'll keep it in a central location and everybody contributes 45 to 50 cards. And then we have a really fun day sitting together around a table and we'll maybe hack it out a little bit.
Yeah. Cause you can spend a day building it, right? And I mentioned it when you showed up today and we was going to record this episode. I said, look, we could all show up and maybe we haven't talked about doing this in our iteration of this, but if you've got a group with, 5, 6, 7, 8 people or whatever, choose a color or a color pair or colorless or whatever, right?
Yeah.
Set a responsibility for everybody. Here is a number of cards. Here is a mana curve even. Maybe, I don't know, maybe you don't want to micromanage it too much, but like this is the way that you can say to everyone, hey, contribute this number of cards. We'll all chip in a pack of sleeves or whatever and we'll build a cube. I think the first iteration, and this is where I'm most excited with I'm most excited to see this first iteration, right? We've all contributed. We all see what cards we've all chosen. But I'm excited to see, what does this look like in 3 months? What does this look like in 6 months?
It could be a dumpster fire. It could be really fun.
It could be still a dumpster fire.
But we can still have a good time with it, right?
It could be incredible right from day one.
Yeah, so the other thing, too, is like if you're thinking to yourself, like, well, Anthony sounds really great, but I really want to control my cards. I'm not comfortable with leaving my cards over. In our case, we've already decided Chris is our general play location, got the biggest table.
That's right.
I've already got a box. We're going to leave it at Chris's house. It's just where most people will be present.
Yep.
You can go into Cube Cobra and you can color designate the cards using their different their systems of setting up, and you could make the red ones Anthony and the green ones Avram and the blue ones Chris if you wanted to, right? You could do color designations within your list, so you could say, hey, I own that. So if as through you do iterations and evolutions as Cube, as new sets come out and pre-releases, draft chaff and all the things, and you want to swap it out, talk to your group, because I think once this initial mold is put together, it's kind of a community like, hey, I'm thinking about adding gravitational shift to this cube. Hey, what do you think? And
don't do it.
Don't do it. Well, it's
terrible
in here right
idea.
Now. It is in here right now.
Oh, it's a great idea, Anthony. Wonderful.
We'll vote on it, basically. I think it'll be a fun, like, social experiment, right? Amongst our 8 to 10 players that we have in our group.
It's funny because one card that I'm going to put in here is going to sort of interact with that in a very, very fun way for whoever draft that. But
and for those that aren't familiar with gravitational shift, because I feel the need to say it now, it was just in my binders forever. It's for 3 colorless and 2 blue. You get an enchantment. Creatures with flying get +2/+0, and creatures without flying get -2/-0.
I want this card.
It's kind of interesting.
I mean, it's got Emrakul on it.
It does. Is that Emrakul? It
looks like Emrakul to me.
It's like a weird Emrakul belly. Who knows? I don't know. Some kind of fish.
It looks like Emrakul the Promised Land to me.
It's like a sea skate or something. So anyway,
talk to us about. All right,
let's move over to black. We've had too much fun with
black cards. All right, tell us about. There's one right there. Tell me. I'm pointing to it.
Clackbridge Troll.
Tell us.
Oh, this card's fun. Clackbridge Troll for 3 colorless and 2 black. You get an 8/8 Troll. Trample Haste. When Clackbridge Troll enters the battlefield, target opponent creates 3/0/1 white goat creature tokens. It's pretty funny.
It's awesome.
It's the Billy Goat Gruff is the story that I think they pulled this from.
Yeah.
At the beginning of combat on your turn, any opponent may sacrifice a creature. If that player does, tap Clackbridge Troll. You gain 3 life and you draw a card. So for 5 mana, you've got a draw engine, life-gaining engine that maybe will eventually swing, right?
There's like the demon that does the same thing. Sometimes the names escape me, but is it a desecration demon or something like that, where you can tap it at the beginning of combat and stuff like that, and you get, the controller gets some kind of benefit. But I will say, like, the fact that this is an 8/8 Trample Haste is already, like, that's pretty cool. Gaining 3 life and drawing a card if you don't want to get attacked, I'm okay, sure, I'll take a free card and gain 3 life for just three colorless and 2
I mean, you don't want to get swatted with an 8/8.
I don't.
No. So the decision's kind of ready. So think of it as kind of like a pseudo, in the way, because I play this one too at a giant cube.
Yep.
And it's in there because it's kind of like a pseudo enchantment that's going to net you card draw and life, right? Until they're just done. They can't take it anymore. The next card, and we're going to kind of highlight a couple of them here because they don't get any love. I'm going to leave it right here, is the Hollow Spectre. For 1 colorless and 2 black, you get a 2/2 Flying Spectre. They may have errated that. I'm not certain. Flying. When Hollow Spectre deals combat damage to a player, you may pay X. If you do, that player reveals X cards from his or her hand, and you choose one of them. That player discards that card. It's just a interesting little, I'm going to get your hand. Maybe I can get one of those giant gins out of your hand, or maybe I can get that gravitational shift out. Some kind of weird. So when I was picking out these cards, I was doing it haphazardly, but with intention, like chaotic intention. Does that make sense? I'm pulling them on my binder, but I wasn't just grabbing them. I'm like, these cards, as I'm doing it, I'm like, okay, this makes sense for something. Someone like David or Christian will find a purpose and go, hey, I want to interact with this idea a little bit. And that may shift, or maybe it'll just be this standalone creature. At the very base of it, it's a 2/2 flyer on rate for 3.
I would agree.
But we'll just take that. We'll call that good enough for government work.
I'm about it. Yeah, exactly. I'm about it. And actually, if we look at the card that's sitting right next to it, it's Abyssal Nocturnus. 1 colorless, 2 black, creature horror, 2/2. Whenever an opponent discards a card, which it could do with Hollow Spectre, it gets +2/+2 and gains fear until end of turn. So I don't know if you noticed that bit of synergy going on right there.
I may have.
You may have.
Yeah, so as I'm going through these, and then there's other cards, and I did add a little bit of power in here, as in a little bit of strength, because I knew that if we went too dumpster fire on the cards, they would.
Sure.
One of the fears that Chris Moore and I talked about is that this community cube, this dumpster fire we're making, comes together and we get together on a Thursday night and it's completely unplayable. That is possible.
It is.
So, but I said, what, I'm going to seed a little bit in here. I'm going to give it a little bit of oomph, a little bit of answers. So I did put Hero's Downfall in here, right? So that you have a card that if Stu adds later down the road a not so great Planeswalker, or maybe we won't say Oko, Crown of Thieves, but maybe the other Oko, right? The one that came from I guess it was like a commander pack or whatever. Everybody gets the point. There's always a worse version that came out of a legend or of a Planeswalker. It's possible.
I think either way, if there's just a Planeswalker and or a creature, I first of all, obviously it's removal.
Yeah.
Right? No cube should really be without. No deck should be without it.
You don't want this to be just creatures just bumping together.
You don't want that, right?
It's boring.
And
Can be.
And I will say, I do like Hero's Downfall very much. I think in a situation like this, where you're putting in preliminary, in a preliminary fashion where you don't know if there's going to be any Planeswalkers, but it's not a super efficient creature removal spell for 3 mana, although it is at instant speed. But, like you say, maybe someone chooses to put a Planeswalker in there that, hey, if I'm in black, I kind of need to deal with this card. Maybe it's something that impacts flyers or card draw or something. And maybe there's, some avenues that are built up there. So, yeah, I think it's a perfect card for something like this.
The last black card that I want to highlight, and I put this in there, is Taste of Death. And for 4 colorless and 2 black, you get a sorcery. Each player sacrifices 3 creatures. You create 3 food tokens. Food tokens gain you. It's potentially netting you 9 life.
Yeah, Eldraine with the food.
Can swing a game. And this art's sick. And this card's 15, 20 cents. I mean, that's what the price point on these cards on average. When I look at 30 cents is really getting to the high mark of some of these bulk rares.
Because if you look at that, let's talk about that. Someone is carving skulls out of very, very large apples. That's what it looks like, to me.
Either creative or exceptionally bored. All of this will be included in the show notes.
Yes. We're going to need to check some of these out, I think.
Yeah, some of them you're like, oh man, why are you running this? You know what? Like I said, this isn't going to necessarily make the final cut.
No.
We get together as a group of us. There'll be 8 to 10 of us sitting around, and we're going to do some serious votes. Or we just say whatever. Just toss them in.
Yeah.
It's up to you. It's up to your group, right?
I'm thinking fun factor is going to be pretty high on the list of.
It's sitting here screaming.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I've got one, and in our very first episode, it was the Swords of Falling Favor. I bobbled on a card. I'm telling the story in our intro about I got decimated by my friend Sean. No matter what I did, he was just crushing me over and over again. This is circa 1997 in the Air Force. It's so comical now to look at this card, knowing this card just beat me to death. And
this was like the antithesis.
This card is my first burn. It is Keldon Warlord. And for 2 colorless and 2 red, you get a Summon Lord. I'm sure it's a barbarian now, errata, uncertain.
It should be Summon Conan.
This art is sick. And he would play 4 of them, and we didn't even pay attention to legendary rules. This is back in the days, folks, when you had the little tiny books, and you had no idea what you're doing, and just played Magic. Keldon Warlord has the power and toughness, each equal to the number of non-wall creatures you control. Very important. If you're running a wall deck, he's not very good.
I will bear that in mind next time I build a wall deck. His
power and toughness is star /star. This art is righteous, though. I almost put this in my Munson Cube metal cube, or at least put it in as a divider, just because this art is metal AF.
I kind of, yeah. It's an incredible piece
Card's
of art.
Not good. It's not good.
It's Conan.
It's Conan.
A magic card.
Been sitting here.
Very cool.
We'll cover one more red one. Stu, would you mind taking over the next one?
All right. So this isn't. I don't know. Maybe this is a bit underwhelming for some. For others, I don't know. I like this card. This to me represents a useful card that's fun. All right. This is in red. It's Izzet Chemister. 2 colorless, 1 red. You get a Goblin Wizard with haste. It's a 1/3. You can pay 1 red and tap Izzet Chemister to exile target instant or sorcery card from your graveyard, or you can pay 1 colorless, 1 red and tap. Cast any number of cards exiled with Izzet Chemister without paying their mana costs. I like this card. I don't think I play it in one of my commander decks anymore, but I did. And I'm pretty confident that the short time that I did, which may have been 10 or 12 games, I definitely got one game of value out of this card. So now I'm excited to see what can we do with this in a cube.
Oh, well, you can run Tivadar of the Thorn. It enters the battlefield and destroys target goblin. That may have been where my brain space
How about you not do that to me? Okay? I was just about to get excited with my Is It Chemister. You know?
And there's some other cards in here too. We're running, so I've got, let's kick up the power notch a little bit, but not so powerful. Let's go with Molten Steel Dragon for 4 colorless and 2 Phyrexian Mountains. If for those, you can pay 2 life instead of paying the cost of tapping red.
That's right.
For each one of those, for those that are not familiar, you get an artifact creature dragon, 4/4 flying. You can also pay Phyrexian or a mountain. Either or. Molten Steel Dragon gets +1/+0 until the end of the turn. This is a 4/4 on rate again. You pay 4 mana, you get a 4/4 flyer on rate. If you pay the 4 life, it's worth it. It's a good trade-off. This is a really powerful card in this environment.
It's a good top end
it
for a red
represents
aggro
a nice
deck.
mid-range aggro-esque versus what the casting cost of a lot of these cards I think will appear, but more to come on that. Let's move over now to what our removal looks like. In this terms, like I made some choices here, and I'll call out the names. I'm not going to read all the cards because it's going to get windy, and I will share this in my show notes.
Sure.
But I've got cards in here like Spitflame and Crater's Claws and Exquisite Firecraft and then Cerebral Eruption. All these have been just sitting in my binders, nowhere to go, no home. And then here's another one. I don't know if it's going to make it. Serpentine Spike. I will read this one. Not so great, but whatever. We'll see what happens. For 5 colorless.
Expensive.
Yeah, 1 billion manas. For 5 colorless and 2 mountains, you get a sorcery. It's got Devoid on it. Wonder if they're running this in Devoid Cube. Have to find out.
Let's check
and Serpentine Spike does 2 damage to target creature, 3 damage to another target creature, 4 damage to a third target creature. If a creature dealt damage this way would die, this turn, exile it instead.
Not quite sure how significant
Don't
the
know.
exile ability is going to be, but who cares? You get 2, 3, and 4 damage. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 damage for 7 mana. It's pretty cool.
It's manageable. It's
Look at the
manageable.
art.
And then we'll kind of cut over to our green section. We're going to touch upon a few of these that I kind of chose. One of them is Ovia, the Pashery Sage Lifecrafter. Huge fan of this card in my artifact cube. For those that don't know, she's a 1/2 legendary human artificer, and you can pay one forest to get her out on the field. And for 2 and 1 forest tapper, create a 1/1 colorless servo artifact creature token. Thought it was a good defense mechanism against some of
like
these
that.
giant dumpster fires are going to be running across the field. I thought
I agree,
she'd
yeah.
give you a defense mechanism, right?
Agree.
And then for 4 colorless and 1 forest, you can tap her, create an XX colors construct artifact creature token, where X is the number of creatures you control. So it's that payoff for going wide strategy. Probably not great, but really efficient on the rate. I thought it was an interesting card.
You're not convincing me that you're not subliminally planning an artifact sub-theme with these cards that you're putting in, okay? I don't believe
it. It may be what I have a lots of. The next one we're going to talk about, I don't want to cover the ones that are interesting. I want to cover the ones that are weird. Stu, would you mind taking on this Meandering Tower Shell and tell the folks what that does?
So, Meandering Tower Shell is a 3 colorless, 2 green turtle with Island Walk. It's a 5/9 for 5. Interesting. But when it attacks, you need to exile it and then return it to the battlefield under your control, tapped and attacking at the beginning of the declare attacker's step on your next turn.
It's like you're getting a speeding ticket or something.
This
right?
this has got that. I remember I have a few copies of this card, right? I
Yeah.
don't know why, but I have one, at least one, maybe 2 or 3 copies. The first time I looked at it, I thought, this is so fascinating to me. I don't remember ever seeing this specific ability of the exile and bring it back.
It was the never-ending story. This was the turtle that was warning that nothing was
Never-ending story. Yeah, so, but to me, this is the kind of card that I want to see in a cube like this.
Yeah, I just want to throw something wild in there and see what happens. And next one, and this was kind of this was a little clickbaity I did this one on purpose. I want to see what happens. It may be a nothing. Let's see. Arachnus Spinner, I added this little clickbaity, right? Arachnus Spinner for 5 colorless and a forest, you get a creature spider 5/7 with reach. Not bad. And then you can tap an untapped spider you control, search your graveyard and your library for a card named Arachnus Web and put it into the battlefield attached to target creature. If you search your library this way, shuffle it. I was just wondering if someone would give up, an Arachnus Web. or an Arcanus web.
Do you have the Arcanus?
I do not.
Arachnus
I've seen it,
web?
but I don't think it's rare. But I have seen it floating around in my binders, probably lost in time.
It wouldn't surprise.
But I thought it was a little quick. I was wondering if one of you
guys
guys would be like, "Oh man, I got this card lying around," and suddenly, bada boom, bada bing.
It's from M12. I mean, there's plenty of people who've been playing around in our group since that long, or since that set. So who knows?
We're kind of starting to wind down here a little bit on this topic. I think everybody kind of gets the idea of the flow. What we're trying to do here, it's community contribution. I've got a few of the. I started just kind of grabbing some 2-color spells and throwing them there, multicolor spells. And one of them I did decide to toss in there that I want to point out that I thought was a big finisher was Biomass Mutation. It's for X, and you got hybrid blue-green. You get an instant. Creatures you control have base power and toughness, XX until end of turn. A weird, strange overrun effect. Don't know. We'll find out when we get there. Combat trick.
The reason why I like this card, I'm not typically a lover of combat tricks. I typically don't take them very highly in Cube, right? Just a personal thing. But winning with them is so incredibly satisfying to me.
Memorable.
I don't know. It is pretty memorable. I don't know if it's just a throwback from when I used to play mono green in Modern or just something else. But to me, this is something that maybe like, hey, I'm going to switch up my usual drafting, and I'll take something like that.
Yeah, 100%. And then we have one more card that we're going to close out. Again, I'm going to share all this in the show notes so that everybody can be involved in this project.
There's danger here.
You can see what. Yeah, this one's actually. I threw in a weird one. I wanted to see if people would bite, and it's going to be. And I think I'm saying this right. It's going to be Pixis. Pixis, Pyxis. We're going to go with that. Whatever the pronunciation of that word is. Do not know of Pandemonium. And for 1 colorless, you get an artifact. Interesting enough, right? You really see the artifact synergy start to come. I'm doing it.
You're not.
I'm doing my contribution.
I know you are.
Yeah, secretly just putting the artifacts in there. And you can tap it. Each player exiles the top card of their library face down. Secret information no one knows, including yourself.
That's right.
And for 7 colorless, you can tap it. Sacrifice Pyxis, don't know, of Pandemonium. Each player turns face up all cards he or she owns exiled. Again, ownership's kind of interesting here,
That's
right?
right.
Kind of fun. We're not going to use that word. Exiled with Pyxis of Pandemonium, then puts all permanent cards among them onto the battlefield.
What I like about this
It's an
card,
interesting build around weird.
it doesn't screw with what's already on the battlefield, right? It's not everybody destroys all creatures or any of that. It's like your board is still your board. You still get to keep all of your board, but now you just get this additional like treasure trove of permanence.
Yeah, I wanted to see what would happen. This card's one I threw in there again. This is going to be up to Chris and David and Stu and Christian and Avram and Nathan and I forget Jason. We're probably forgetting other people.
Of course.
Bucky. But as we go through these iterations of this design, everybody's going to contribute a piece of the pie. And the concept is the dumpster fire, right? We're just throwing them all in the fire.
That's right.
And then we're going to help forge this into a cube. When it's all said and done, we're gonna start doing cutting some of the fat off the bone, right? We're gonna pull it in. And this is gonna be a multi-episode as we do other. This is my contribution episode. The next one's gonna be others, and I'm gonna encourage them to put cards in there. I think Stu might be on deck soon. I know Chris is already going through binders,
and I think
Christian's all over it. So as we do this, I'm gonna have people explain their logic and reason for adding this to the cube.
Well, I think we definitely want to talk about, we definitely want to get some input from whoever's adding these cards, right? But we also want to make sure that we're giving this, as we like to on this show, the sort of holistic and 40,000 foot view. So we're, the experienced cube curators, there's plenty of them in our group that can look down on it from above, right? We do definitely want to make sure that it is the dumpster fire and there is a bit of chaos in there, but you do want to make sure that it's playable as well, right? You don't want it to be that there's either, one color or one archetype that's like, supremely overpowered all the rest of them, or there's just way too much chaff or not enough fun in there, or not enough fixing, right? There's a lot of considerations. Even though it is the dumpster fire, we still want this to be a successful, playable, enjoyable.
Kind of like the fire department comes out and does
a controlled burn.
Controlled burn.
It's a controlled burn. Exactly.
And so we want to kind of do that. And it's good it's a learning opportunity for it. So we have some members in our group that have not yet dipped their foot in the water and building a cube. So I think this is an exciting opportunity for them to be part of a idea, right? And put their foot in the water to see what it's like to design, build, and curate a cube.
Absolutely.
And we'll work together as a team. And then once it comes down to this is the final-esque product, then we have an opportunity to sit down and go, hey, Hey, I got a new card. What do you guys think about this? What do you?
Let's put it in.
What do you think?
Let's get it in there.
Put it in. Let's do it.
No questions. Just get it in
jam
there.
it in there.
Choose a card, dump it,
giant
get it
bulk
in
rare.
there.
Yeah. There's gonna
Why
be some
not?
logic behind it. We don't want to make this overly curated. This is meant to be fun and a little loosey goosey, right?
Yes.
And so it's a different experience opposed to it, and that's important. Is that if you're a multi-cube owner such as myself, it's important that your players experience a different level of play or a different story. In my opinion, when they sit down, they play these different aspects of the game. Some have this archetype, some have this theme, certain have this type of size, cube curation, etc. It's very important for me as a curator to have multiple games so that I'm not making multiple iterations of the game of Monopoly that plays the same just because it's Star Wars.
I would agree. And also, if you have a group where you've got maybe 3 or 4, players that are very, very experienced, cube builders, and maybe you've got 3 or 4 players that less so, that are really interested, this is the chance for them to like really get into the cube design, right? Because once you start getting these cards, right, in this cube that are your cards, now you're invested, right? Now you've got an active interest, because not only are you probably almost certainly going to play this cube, now you're in the process of designing it as well, right? So fantastic entry point from a playgroup perspective of getting people into building cubes and curating and refining and making those choices. Like I said, I'm super excited.
It's amazing. It's gonna be a collaboration, and then we're gonna just have fun with it. It's gonna be a democratic type vote, right? Where everybody kind of talks about it and go, "Hey, I'm thinking about adding, I don't know, Cultivator's Caravan. What do you guys think?" Right?
It's not going to be a democrat.
Yay or the
As
nays.
my boy Pesterly will say, it's a dictatorship, and that's it. My vote counts too.
All right. So this has been a fun, interesting introductory episode into the dumpster fire project that we're working on here. Collaborative cube community within our play circle that I highly recommend that everyone takes on something like this. And I want to really thank the listener.
Okay, so we want to give a shout out to Alan Christopherson. He was the person on social media that we found this phenomenal idea from. I know, Anthony, you reached out and
did say
said
he's not the inventor of.
He's not the inventor,
but he planted the seed, the brain worm.
He did,
and I gotta be thankful.
He did.
This is
We're going to give him a
project.
shout. We got to give him a shout out for just the exposure. I've never heard anyone really talk much about the concept of a collaborative cube, and specifically with like. I would say you could call it a restriction. So shout out to Alan. I really do hope you listen to this episode. We'll dedicate this one to you. This is a fantastic idea, and we hope that yourself and anyone else that's listened to this will get some real enjoyment out of this one. And we can't wait to record some more episodes in this.
All right, so we're going to move over to our socials. If you love the show, we would truly appreciate a 5-star review on your favorite player.
So something else you can do to support the show, we are now affiliated with Inked Gaming. If you're not familiar with Inked Gaming, then you should be. You should definitely check them out. They've got all kinds of customizable playmats, dice bags, mouse pads, the whole 9 yards. So if you're looking for something to, aesthetically spice up your deck, your cube, whatever the case may be, go check them out. Like I say, they're a new affiliate of ours. We're super pumped to be working with them.
And we have... It's going to be a secret. We're not going to share it right now, but we have a huge announcement coming soon with another major affiliation that'll be really wonderful to the community. So everybody stay tuned. Big announcement coming soon from Ubercube.
Cool. And as always, you can find us on Twitter. We are at UbercubeMTGPod. If you'd like to reach out to us via email, if you want to talk about one of our previous episodes or give us some ideas for future episodes or even just talk to us about Cube, reach out to us. We are ubercubemtgpodcast@gmail.com. All of our socials are linked on our social media pages, on Twitter. Come, have a chat to us on the Discord. We'll happily talk about your cube, our cube, a Moto cube, whatever cube you want to talk about. And last of all, let's quickly from Anthony, tell us a bit about the Patreon.
Oh, so we have a Patreon that's been
How's
set
that
up
going?
for it's going splendidly.
Awesome.
Not so much, but but I do appreciate that people. I would like for people to take a look at it because that's how we do keep the
lights on.
We keep the lights on. We keep adding more features and stuff to basically what we're trying to do. Upgrade our equipment, get better quality. It's just the way, right? These things do have an associated.
We appreciate the support. Hey, it's always nice to.
But
to
either way, we're good without. But
of course.
but we do have features and stuff that we can offer listeners to make that more of a premium type idea.
Absolutely.
Support your ideas on the show. Have you do shout outs, etc. Cover your cube.
Yeah, do some more episodes.
Come on to the show. I mean, there's things to add here, right? But it's an experimental phase for us. I am new to this game. I am 45 years old, boomer-ish at this point.
You're definitely a boomer.
I have definitely closed in on boomer status. So forgive me as I do these things. Other than that, we're going to say the thing that we always say here at UberCube is happy cubing.